My name is Harper Woods, and I was 31 the year I learned exactly what my family thought my civil rights were worth. We were somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. I was sweating through my cotton shirt in the cramped rear jump seat of a commercial flight. My heart pounding at 140 beats per minute. My golden retriever service dog, Atlas, was wedged under my calves, keeping the blood flowing to my brain. A flight attendant handed me a porcelain dish of warm cashews, avoiding eye contact. She just pointed toward the front of the plane where the premium cabin sat behind a velvet curtain. Taped to the dish was a yellow square of paper with my mother's handwriting. "Hope you and the dog aren't too squished." My parents and my perfectly healthy sister were up there, drinking mimosas in lay-flat leather seats. They had told me there was no room for my service dog. What they left out was that they had used my federally protected medical travel vouchers to pay for their luxury upgrades, leaving me in the cargo bulkhead to suffer a severe medical flare-up alone. They assumed I would sit in the back and stay quiet. They forgot that I am an actuary, and I build my career on calculating exactly how to dismantle a liability. If you know what it feels like to be treated like an inconvenience by the people who are supposed to protect you, tell me your age in the comments and hit subscribe. We have a lot of work to do. The math of my family has always been skewed. My father, Richard, runs a regional logistics firm and believes status is a substitute for character. My mother, Sylvia, treats country club optics like a full-time job. My younger sister, Vanessa, has never held a paycheck but carries a handbag that costs more than my car. Then there is me. I assess risk. I read fine print. I navigate postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, a nervous system disorder that makes my blood pool and my heart race simply from standing up. The disparity started forming 4 hours earlier at the departure gate in Detroit Metro Airport. The morning sun cast long shadows across the terminal floor. I stood, holding the heavy leather harness on Atlas, while my mother inspected her pristine manicure. She reached into her designer tote and handed me a flimsy, thermal-printed boarding pass, row 48, middle seat. She did not look up from her nails. "I am sorry, Harper. The gate agent said they enforce a strict weight limit on animals in the premium cabins. Atlas just does not fit the dimensions." I stared at the curling receipt in my palm. It was a statistical impossibility. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits airlines from restricting service animals based on cabin class, provided they fit within the passenger foot space. Atlas fit everywhere. He was trained to curl into a tight ball under any seat. I knew the federal regulations. I also knew the precise social cost of arguing with my mother in a public terminal. I folded the receipt and put it in my pocket. 10 yards away, bypassing the economy queue, my father and my sister stood at the priority podium. Vanessa wore oversized sunglasses indoors, tapping a manicured finger against her iced matcha latte. Richard handed his phone to the attendant to scan their digital passes. I stepped closer to throw away a coffee cup and heard the gate agent speak. Her voice carried a bright, professional cheerfulness. "Brilliant use of the medical vouchers, Mr. Woods. That covers the upgrade tier for all 3 seats. Enjoy the champagne service." Richard offered a modest, practiced nod. "We had them sitting around, figured we should put them to use." My breath caught in my throat. 8 months prior, a different airline had mishandled my service dog clearance during a work trip, stranding us overnight in Chicago. The resulting settlement yielded 3 high-value, federally protected travel vouchers issued strictly under my name and tied to my medical file. I had left the physical paperwork in my father's home safe for security because I lived in a ground-floor apartment with a history of break-ins. Sylvia adjusted her silk scarf, holding her own boarding pass. The thick, glossy cardstock caught the terminal light. It was a stark physical contrast to the receipt I had just put in my pocket. "We will see you in Maui, sweetie." She turned her back and joined the priority lane. I did not point out the discrepancy. I did not raise my voice. I boarded early with the pre-clearance group, walking the length of the aircraft. I passed the wide leather pods in first class, where a flight attendant was already pouring orange juice into crystal flutes. I kept walking until the aisle narrowed, the ceiling dipped, and the legroom vanished. Row 48 was pressed against the rear galley wall directly across from the lavatories. Now, hours later, the floor panels vibrated beneath my boots. The cabin air tasted thin and metallic. My autonomic nervous system was failing to regulate my blood pressure. Every time the plane hit turbulence, my vision blurred at the edges. Atlas sensed the physiological shift. He pressed his heavy, warm chin onto my knees. Applying the deep pressure therapy he was trained to perform. The physical grounding was the only thing keeping me from fainting. The flight attendant passed by again, carrying an empty tray of champagne flutes back from the front of the plane. I looked at the yellow sticky note she had delivered earlier. "Hope you and the dog aren't too squished." My mother had not sent the warm cashews to be kind. She sent them to remind me of my place. She wanted me to know they were enjoying the premium service, and she wanted to ensure I felt the isolation of the back row. People like Sylvia do not just want to win. They need you to know you lost. I brushed the salt from my fingertips. The physical pain in my chest was sharp, but my mind felt remarkably clear. As an actuary, I evaluate deficits. My father had just handed me a substantial data deficit. If he had used my medical vouchers, he had to bypass the security protocols on my federal travel portal. I reached under the seat and unzipped my carry-on bag. I pulled out my laptop and set it on the narrow plastic tray table. I navigated to the airline network screen and paid $30 for the in-flight internet connection. The loading icon spun on the screen, casting a pale blue light across my face. I needed to isolate the variables. I needed to see exactly how Richard Woods had stolen my civil rights to buy a glass of champagne. The data would not lie, and I was about to run the numbers. The blue light of my laptop screen illuminated the dark cabin. The airplane internet connection was notoriously slow, but I had built a career on patience. Actuaries do not rush. We gather data. We establish baselines. We look for the deviation in the pattern. I rested my wrists on the cold aluminum casing of my keyboard, while the engine hummed a steady low frequency through the floorboards. Atlas shifted his weight over my feet, letting out a soft sigh. He was working hard to keep my blood pressure stable, but the altitude was taking its toll. My joints ached, and my vision swam every time I turned my head too fast. I took a slow breath and typed the web address for the Federal Travel Compliance Registry. This was the secure portal where my medical accommodations were logged. It was tied directly to my social security number and my diagnostic file. The loading icon spun in a lazy circle. The portal finally loaded. I entered my credentials. The screen refreshed, displaying a detailed ledger of my medical travel accommodations. The top entries were the 3 high-value vouchers from the Chicago incident. Each voucher had a unique alphanumeric code, a date of issue, and a status. All 3 were listed as redeemed. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked on the first voucher. The details expanded. It showed the date of redemption, the airline, and the passenger names associated with the booking. My father, Richard Woods. My mother, Sylvia Woods. My sister, Vanessa Woods. All 3 names were listed. The system clearly indicated that the vouchers, issued solely in my name for my medical needs, had been used to upgrade their first-class tickets. I leaned back, a cold, calculated fury replacing the earlier pain. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act of fraud. My father, a man who prided himself on his business acumen, had knowingly bypassed federal regulations and airline security protocols. He had leveraged my disability for his own luxury. I closed the laptop, the blue light vanishing. The cabin was dark again, but my mind was brightly illuminated. I knew exactly what I had to do. The plane landed in Maui. And the humid air hit me like a physical blow. My parents and Vanessa were already waiting at the baggage claim, looking refreshed and annoyingly cheerful. "Harper, there you are," Sylvia chirped, as if she hadn't seen me in weeks, not hours. "Did you enjoy your flight?" Richard gave me a condescending smile. "We were worried about you back there, with Atlas and all." I met his gaze, a quiet resolve hardening my features. "Oh, I was fine, Dad, just doing some paperwork." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He knew, he had to, but he quickly recovered, his usual bluster returning. "Excellent, excellent. Let's get to the resort. I've booked us a beautiful suite. The resort was stunning. A sprawling paradise of lush gardens and ocean views. My parents had a magnificent oceanfront suite, Vanessa a slightly smaller but still luxurious room. I, of course, had a standard ground floor room, far from the main building. As soon as I was alone, I called Arthur Vance, the airline's corporate mitigation specialist. He was the one who had handled my Chicago settlement. Mr. Vance, this is Harper Woods. I need to report a serious breach of federal travel compliance. I calmly laid out the facts, detailing how my medical vouchers had been illegally redeemed by my family. Mr. Vance was silent for a moment. Miss Woods, this is a very serious allegation. Federal law is quite clear on the use of these vouchers. We will launch an immediate investigation. Can you provide the voucher codes and passenger names? I gave him everything. He assured me he would be in touch within 24 hours. The next morning, I received an email from Mr. Vance. The airline's internal audit had confirmed my allegations. The fraudulent use of my vouchers was undeniable. The airline was prepared to offer a substantial settlement to avoid legal action and potential federal penalties. They were also offering to transfer the full value of the original vouchers, plus an additional sum, into an irrevocable trust in my name. The total amount was far more than I had ever anticipated. I felt a surge of triumph, quickly followed by a pang of sadness. This was my family, but they had chosen their path and I had chosen mine. I replied to Mr. Vance, accepting the settlement and requesting a notary meeting to finalize the documents immediately. Later that day, my father cornered me by the resort pool. Harper, about those vouchers, there's been a misunderstanding. I was just trying to optimize our travel arrangements, for the family. He tried to put on his charming businessman persona. But his eyes darted nervously. I've already spoken to the airline. They're being quite difficult, but I'm sure we can smooth this over. Just sign a few papers, say it was a clerical error. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. Dad. There's no misunderstanding. You committed fraud, and the airline agrees. His face went pale. Fraud? Harper, don't be ridiculous. It's family. Family doesn't steal from each other, Dad. Especially not from a disabled daughter who relies on those accommodations. I walked away, leaving him standing by the pool, his carefully constructed facade crumbling, the notification confirming the 3. Boardroom meeting sat unread on my lock screen. I had exactly 45 minutes to navigate the sprawling resort property and secure my financial independence. I packed the silver laptop back into the canvas tote, ensuring the zipper was fully closed. I adjusted the leather mobility harness across Atlas, securing the heavy brass buckles. My hands were shaking slightly. A persistent low-grade headache throbbed behind my eyes, a common precursor to a severe autonomic drop. I needed to move slowly. I exited the ground floor room and stepped into the heavy, suffocating humidity of the midday sun. The most direct route to the mezzanine level required traversing the extensive botanical gardens that linked the residential towers. The air in the gardens was stagnant, trapped beneath the dense canopy of ancient banyan trees and flowering hibiscus. I walked along the winding aggregate path, focusing my vision on the geometric patterns in the stone. 50 yards ahead, a familiar group blocked the walkway. Richard, Cynthia, and Vanessa were strolling leisurely, admiring a cascading water feature. They had clearly regrouped after Richard failed his digital breach attempt. They looked composed. Dressed in fresh linen resort wear, presenting a united front of affluent leisure. Cynthia spotted me first. Her posture stiffened. She leaned toward Richard, whispering something urgently. They stopped walking, waiting for me to approach. I maintained my slow, measured pace. I did not want a confrontation in the heat. "Harper," Richard called out, his voice carrying a forced, artificial cheerfulness. "We were just looking for you. We need to finalize our dinner plans for this evening. I am booking a table at the Oceanfront Seafood Grill. We have a lot to celebrate and a lot to discuss regarding your paperwork." He was projecting confidence, hoping to override the memory of me catching him in my hotel room. He believed he could still bully me into submission at a public dinner table. I opened my mouth to decline the invitation, but the words caught in my dry throat. A sudden, sharp ringing filled my ears, drowning out the ambient sound of the waterfall. My peripheral vision collapsed inward, replaced by a swarm of dark, gray static. The oppressive humidity and the rapid walking pace had triggered a catastrophic failure in my vascular system. My blood pressure was plummeting. Atlas reacted instantly. He did not wait for a verbal command. He recognized the physiological shift. The 70 lb golden retriever lunged forward, crossing directly in front of my shins. He hit my knees with the heavy bulk of his shoulder, breaking my forward momentum. His training dictated that a controlled fall was always preferable to a sudden fainting concussion. My legs gave way. I collapsed onto the hot aggregate stone, scraping my palms against the rough surface. Atlas immediately circled my body, pressing his warm, solid weight firmly against my chest, applying deep pressure therapy to force the pooling blood back toward my brain. I lay on the concrete, staring up at the bright, fractured light filtering through the green canopy. The world spun in a chaotic, slow-motion blur. The physical collapse pulled my memory backward across a timeline of 7 years. The harsh sunlight faded, replaced by the sterile fluorescent glare of a clinical diagnostic room in Michigan. I was 24 years old, sitting on crinkling examination paper, holding a thick medical folder. A neurologist stood across from me, pointing to a complex chart outlining the electrical pathways of the heart. He explained that my autonomic nervous system was permanently damaged. He used words like chronic, incurable, and lifelong management. He detailed the fainting spells, the extreme fatigue, the constant pain. He also explained the financial burden. The specialized treatments, the medications, the need for a service animal. I remembered my parents' reaction. Not comfort, not concern, but a cold, calculating fear. My father, ever the businessman, immediately started talking about health insurance premiums and the cost of a service dog. My mother, ever the social climber, worried about how my condition would look to their country club friends. Vanessa, oblivious, asked if my service dog would be cute enough for Instagram. Back in the present, lying on the hot stone, I heard my mother's voice. "Harper, get up, you're making a scene," Vanessa giggled. "Seriously, Harper, this is so dramatic," my father, however, was silent. He stood there, watching Atlas work, a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, or even a fleeting understanding in his eyes. I pushed through the haze, focusing on Atlas's steady pressure. The world slowly righted itself. I sat up, my palms stinging. My parents and Vanessa still stood there, a tableau of self-absorption. "I'm fine," I said, my voice hoarse, "just a flare-up." Richard finally spoke, his voice strained. "Harper, we need to talk about this settlement. It's completely out of hand." I looked at him, then at Sylvia and Vanessa. "There's nothing to discuss. The settlement is final, and it's mine." I slowly got to my feet, leaning on Atlas. "And no, I won't be joining you for dinner. I have a meeting." I walked away, leaving them stunned in the botanical gardens. I made it to the boardroom, signed the papers, and secured my future. The settlement, far from just compensating me for the stolen vouchers, was enough to give me true financial independence. It was enough to ensure I would never again be at the mercy of my family's cruel calculations. The following day, I packed my bags. I left a note for my parents. "Thank you for the vacation and for the lesson in actuarial science." I booked my own first-class ticket home, with Atlas by my side, legally and comfortably. My parents, in their pursuit of luxury and appearances, had commodified me. They looked at a daughter who required a service dog and saw an aesthetic liability. They stripped me of my humanity and reduced me to a line item, a convenient tax write-off, and a source of travel upgrades. This commodification of children is a quiet poison in many affluent families. It creates a devastating dichotomy between siblings, perfectly illustrated by the diverging paths of Harper and Vanessa. Vanessa was the golden child, shielded from accountability and encouraged to view life through a camera lens. She was taught that appearance is the only currency that holds value. But parents who teach their children to live beyond their means, both financially and morally, are not setting them up for success. They are setting a trap. Vanessa's ultimate reality, drowning in wedding debt, working retail to pay off vendors, stripped of her influencer facade. is the direct result of parents who failed to instill the value of honest labor and authentic self-worth. They gave her everything, and in doing so left her with nothing. I, conversely, was the scapegoat. I was banished to the shadows, told my medical needs were a burden, and expected to absorb the family's disrespect and silence. But there is a distinct danger in underestimating the child you force into the cold. When you deny a child the warmth of a supportive family, they are forced to build their own fire. I developed an actuary's mind, not just for my career, but for my survival. I learned the importance of fairness and integrity precisely because I was entirely deprived of them. I became strong, self-reliant, and unbreakable. But the cost was the total loss of my familial bond. I had to parent myself, learning accountability the hard way because the adults in the room refused to carry the weight. The core lesson here is that family responsibility is not about providing luxury. It is not about securing the best table at the restaurant or flying in premium cabins. True traditional parenting is about holding space for your children's vulnerabilities. It is about modeling integrity. If Richard had possessed the moral courage to admit his logistics firm was struggling, if he had asked his family to adjust their lifestyle rather than resorting to corporate theft, the entire tragedy could have been avoided. But a culture that values the appearance of success over the reality of character breeds desperate people. And desperate people will sacrifice anyone, even their own disabled daughter, to maintain the illusion. Raising children requires the emotional intelligence to recognize that they are independent individuals who rely on us to teach them how to navigate an unfair world with grace. When parents fail in that duty, when they choose manipulation over honesty, they break the most sacred contract in human society. They teach their children that love is transactional and that loyalty only lasts until the credit limit is reached. If the themes of this story resonate with you, if you have ever recognized the hollow foundation of a toxic family dynamic, or found the strength to walk away from people who demand your silence, you are not alone. There is a community of people learning to read the fine print of their own lives. Subscribe to the channel Our Vengeance, where we explore the quiet, undeniable power of walking away with your dignity intact. Drop a comment and share your own experiences. The truth is heavy, but it is the only thing that sets us free. In the end, we all leave a ledger behind. The numbers are not measured in dollars or square footage or the tier of our airline tickets. The true accounting of a family is measured in the quiet moments of crisis. Who held your hand when you fell? Who told the truth when it was hard? Who saw your pain and offered a safe place to rest? Richard and Sylvia Woods thought they were purchasing a legacy of luxury, but they were only buying their own isolation. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of raising a family is the realization that our children are always keeping score. They are quietly recording our choices, our priorities, and our silences. One day, the child you raised will sit across from you at a table. They will look at the life you built, the values you modeled, and the love you either freely gave or selfishly withheld. And when that day comes, you have to ask yourself, when they finally do the math, what exactly will you be worth?